The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Welcome to another edition of the Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings podcast. I'm your host, Christian Villere. You can find me on Twitter at MyBuddyChris. For all of Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings coverage on Twitter, it's at Hoop Ball Kings. And for all of your NBA news, NBA fantasy news, and Sacramento Kings coverage, period, it's hoop-ball.com, the new and improved hoop-ball.com. There is now a team-specific page for the Sacramento Kings. Go there to get all of these podcasts, as well as all of the great work from our Sacramento Kings Beat Bloggers. On the show today, we have one of those Beat Bloggers. His name, Jon Schifferle. You can find him on Twitter at Jon Schifferle. Also, resident Hoop Ball draft expert analyst. That's what I've dubbed him. Zach Feldman, and you can find him on Twitter at ZF_analytics. As usual, we discussed the NBA draft, and we spent a ton of time talking about Luka Doncic, why Zach Feldman likes Luka Doncic more than DeAndre Ayton. We talked why the Kings have to take Luka Doncic with the number 2 pick in the draft. It has to happen. As Kings fans, John and I decided to will it into existence with this podcast. Next, we moved into some possibilities for the Kings with the 36th pick, and we wrapped it up with some trade possibilities. However unlikely they may be, they still had to be talked about. Enjoy this episode of the Hoop Ball Sacramento Kings podcast. Not only have we corralled the Sacramento Kings beat blogger for Hoop Ball himself, Jon Schifferle, joining us on this pod as well, Hoop Ball draft expert, analyst. How would you like to phrase it, Zach?
It's something like that. Definitely not an expert, but...
Expert analyst is what we'll go with. Zach Feldman, coming to us from The Ohio State University. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And John, you want to pipe in there just so we know you're live?
Yeah, I'm on.
Fantastic. Well, now with that rousing start, we're good to go here. Zach, who do you think will go number 1 in the draft, and who do you have as number 1 in the draft?
It sounds like it's going to be Ayton. It would be surprising if it was anyone else at this point. I have Doncic ahead of him, but I can't see, from everything that they've reported, Ayton himself has said, I'm going number 1, so we can pretty much lock it in.
What makes you put Doncic over Ayton at this point?
Right now, I think a big factor is the EuroLeague is much better than the NCAA, which I think a lot of people don't like to acknowledge, but he's playing with full-grown athletes who are being paid and have either been in the NBA or are an NBA-level talent. At any time, there could be 5 players or so that could be NBA-level talent, whereas the NCAA, maybe you have 2 or 3, and they're a lot more mature, and their defense is a lot better as well, where Ayton was playing a lot of power forward at Arizona, and when you watch his tape, he's just a man compared to the guys he's playing against when it's a 6'7" power forward from Eastern California State College University. It doesn't stand out on the page as much, but they are very close for me.
Now, John, you and I have spoken a bunch about Ayton and Doncic. How are we supposed to rate, both of you are data guys, but I'll direct this to John first. How are we supposed to rate, quantify Luka's experience going from 13 to 19, dealing with 36-year-old men on a daily basis in a basketball setting?
Well, going to the data point that you just said, there was someone, I think it was Kevin Pelton with ESPN earlier this year, mentioned the fact that a lot of teams that have these sort of analytics models that try to predict future success for these players essentially had to just throw these models out because there's no if you listen to them and how good they said Doncic would be, it was just wildly unrealistic for any player to be this good. And it's because he's not even remotely close to what anyone's ever seen in Europe before. So, at least at his age, it's not like no one in Europe has ever played this well. It's just that no one in Europe has ever played this well at this level at just, 19 years old. Or I think he started playing for Real Madrid for the full club at like 16, something like that. So if you're just going to go based on that, Doncic, it's not even a discussion. He should be number one. But beyond that, I think there's a good argument for both. But I think I probably lean Ayton at this point.
Zach, Doncic has fallen for whatever reason on a lot of people's draft boards. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt for whatever reason saying that he's going to fall in the draft. I heard someplace that it had to do with, or this person's theory on it was he's falling because his play later on in whatever season he's already in hadn't been as good as his first half. What do you make of it, and what's your thought on why he's falling?
I've heard that too, is that he was definitely fatigued by the end of his season and the Euro Final Four or whatever they call it over there. And it's interesting because Ayton played 30 games this year, 32, whatever that college season is, where Doncic has played basketball for 18 straight months now. And he's played 90 games or so over that span, or whatever that number is. So to kind of compare the two using that, I don't think it's very fair. It speaks to the experience Doncic has had and has played with and against NBA players in that time span. There's a couple good videos of him absolutely destroying Kristaps in a few possessions in Eurobasket. So I think while it hurts the numbers, I think you do have to take the context of he's played for a long time now without too much of a break, where the college schedule is a lot more favorable.
John, and I'll put this to you as well, Zach. At this point, how can the Kings not take Doncic? Or better yet, Doncic is the pick, right? Do you have anybody else that you really think the Kings should pick?
For me, the player that gets thrown out there a lot is Michael Porter. And I look at them and I say, I think personally that Doncic is a better shooter. He's not even comparable as a passer. Defensively, I think you can see that Porter might have a little more potential there, but Doncic at this point, he's probably not that far behind. I mean, Porter was not that great in high school. There's plenty of video of him just getting dominated by Marvin Bagley that I've seen. There's also just video of him at Missouri where he didn't really do well at all. At least Doncic is a pretty smart defender, a pretty engaged defender. So to me, when I go down the list of all the things that Porter's supposed to do well, it's tough to really pick one that I really think Porter's better at. He's a little taller, and that's about it. So I don't see how you could pick Porter over Doncic. He's a little more athletic, but I think his athleticism has been way overblown. And when you factor in the fact that he's having trouble getting out of bed for workouts, I think there's not really a huge reason to put him over Doncic in that respect either. Marvin Bagley, I can understand only because Bagley is such an incredible athlete that if you feel like he's either more skilled than he showed at Duke or that he can develop skills over the next 2 or 3 years that will make him a drastically different player, then that's not how I feel, but I could see someone feeling that way. He's certainly on a different level than Doncic as an athlete. So that's really the only player that I can really see at 2 that I would be able to understand. But from my perspective, I don't know why you would go with anyone other than Doncic at 2.
Now, Zach, if the Kings don't go with Doncic at 2, are you freaking out like crazy that the Bulls have just a bit higher chance of getting Doncic than they would have otherwise? For everyone who doesn't know, Zach is from Chicago and he's a Chicago Bulls fan.
Yeah, I don't think so. Mostly because it would probably require a trade up, which I'm not a big fan of.
But it would be crazy if the Kings don't pick Doncic in your opinion, correct?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. He's the guy. I mean, I have him number 1. So
have you watched? Yeah. Sorry to trample on you, but how much of his games have you watched games of his, or like me, is it just highlights?
No, I've watched games. I watched a couple of the Eurobasket games. I think that's what it's called, where it's the European tournament, where he played with Goran Dragic and against Kristaps. I watched the game against Kristaps. He's confident and he's poised and he's so young to have that as well. At times his shot selection's a little bad and he can kind of dribble into trouble. But I mean, he's competing at a high level with NBA players next to him or against him already, and that we haven't seen that from anyone else yet.
So where I'm at right now, because I think Ayton is probably going to go number 1, despite the fact that the Phoenix Suns have drafted 3 big men in the top 8 in the last 2 or 3 years. So the Kings are looking at Doncic, Bagley, and if the scuttlebutt out of Sacramento media, I'll just put it that way, at the moment, points to the Kings picking Porter Jr., which I pray to the higher-ups that doesn't actually happen. Are Kings fans happier with the prospect of, or the possibility of Doncic improving his athleticism and tweaking some of these issues around maturity on the court, such as you mentioned, Zach, like shot selection, or would you prefer to go with a guy who's a known scorer with great athleticism in Bagley and risk that athleticism deteriorating? There's no way to know when it will deteriorate, but it will eventually deteriorate at some time in the future. If you're a Kings fan or just somebody looking at this and just kind of deciphering it, would you rather bet on Doncic getting better with those things, or hoping that Bagley's athleticism holds up for a really long time and ends up leading you to inside post-game dominance that can lead a team to contender status? John,
personally,
yeah. Or Zach.
John.
Let's go. No, let's go. Zach. John's on here all the time. Let's go with you, Zach.
I'm not a big Bagley fan personally. I think of anyone in the top 5, I think he has the highest bust potential. And when you look at his shot, it's really not there. He shot well from beyond the 3-point line in college. But if you look at the free throw percentage, which is a better indicator of your outside shot in the NBA, it's only 62. And he missed a lot of his shots left and right, and it was bad. It just looked ugly. And that's something that it just seemed like he didn't have too much of a feel. He didn't shoot well off the dribble. He's an explosive athlete, and he can rebound very well. But of all the big men available, he's probably below the likes of Jaren Jackson and Bamba, and probably even Wendell Carter for me.
Schiff, would you like to be the counterpoint to that? Because I know you've been high on Bagley.
I definitely agree with the bust potential comment. He's I guess I don't think there's anyone that's going to disagree with the fact that he can't be the player that he was at Duke, just trying to sort of dominate people with his athleticism and energy. I mean, he can in the NBA. It's not as if he's not going to have a role. I think his floor is probably something like a Kenneth Faried type player. And as far as the shot goes, I'll echo a lot of that, where he's just not a player that's going to shoot off the dribble, and he's not a player that's going to catch and shoot quickly. What he does is really, at the college level, you saw a lot of cases where he had plenty of time to shoot. Essentially, he caught, and people knew that if you close out on him, he can really explode in a straight line past you. But if you don't close out, he'll just take the shot. And he's not a super comfortable shooter. And when he has a bunch of time and space, he'll be fine. But NBA athletes don't have to make that decision of, all right, I can close out and he'll easily explode past me or not, and he'll have an open shot. They're athletic enough to at least go somewhere between that. And that's going to mean he's going to take a lot less threes and he's going to be a lot less successful. So that's something he'll have to work on. At least he has a baseline at this point, and it's really just hoping that he develops more than he does. But as far as, athletes go in this draft, I probably have him number one. Ayton's larger. But I don't know. I don't have anyone over Bagley as an athlete, and that's where the potential comes from. But if I were the Kings, I would probably consider, I would definitely consider Bamba and Jackson over him, and I would also throw in Wendell Carter. I think Wendell Carter's being a little underrated. So
Doncic is falling on a lot of boards. Let's pretend they don't take Doncic. Let's pretend they don't take Bagley for the reasons we just stated. Who then becomes the prospect the Kings fans should be looking at and saying that they can get excited about as the number 2 pick, Zach?
It would be probably Jaren Jackson for me from Michigan State. I mean, a lot of people like to talk about the age with Bagley of how he's so young because he reclassified, but Jackson's actually younger. He's a tremendous defender. I mean, he's going to come in and should defend right away and still has potential to grow. He has a lot better touch on his shot. And I think his shot comes out a little low, and that could end up being a problem if defenders close out on it. But I think he could end up being the best player in the draft for sure.
And who would the player after Doncic and Bagley be for you, John?
I don't think I disagree with the Jaren Jackson. I think at that point you're really probably talking about Jackson or Mo Bamba. I don't know if I'm missing anyone. I would honestly at that point be strictly thinking about trading back. I find it hard to believe that the Kings... I just don't think it's a good decision to go with Porter at 2. And I think the easy way to parse that out is you look at Phoenix. They're supposedly locked into Ayton, but they've also brought in Bagley for a workout, Jaren Jackson, Mo Bamba, and obviously there's been talk about them thinking about Luka Doncic. And Porter hasn't really been mentioned in that group. So you have this group of, that's, I think, 5 players that Phoenix is considering at 1. I don't understand how you can think it's a good idea to pick someone that's not in that group of 5 at number 2. Porter's just, I don't think I'd have him number 2 before the back injury. And I certainly don't have him number 2 after it. So I think at this point, you're really talking about trading down if it's not Bagley or Doncic.
Well, we've got the resident draft expert of Hoopball on the program. Zach, I want to get your feelings on possibilities for the 36th pick in the draft. Who do you think the Kings would be smart to pick up there?
There's a lot of options, and obviously we can't. It's the farther down we go, the harder to predict who's going to be there. But there's a lot of options for 3-and-D wings, guys like the high school guys like Mitchell Robinson and Anthony Simmons are going to be there, or could be there, I should say. So it's, there's Shake Milton is one of my favorite guys in the draft, and he could definitely be there. Gary Trent Jr., where the Kings don't really need the shooting as much because they have Buddy and Bogdan already. Jared Vanderbilt should be an elite defender, or could be an elite defender. He was at the college level. He's long and athletic. His offensive game is really not there right now. Good rebounder, can probably defend 3s and 4s right away. So I think if they go, I don't really think you can make a bad pick in the second round, or at 36 early in the second round. I knew you guys threw around a few names on the last pod, I believe it was, but it depends who's there. I like Jalen Brunson come in, be a good leader. even though he'd be a rookie, he's a good locker room guy, hard worker. His shot has increased a lot in the time since they won the championship. So Moritz Wagner from Michigan, good offensive center if they don't take a big man early. So I think there's a lot of options.
John, we've had a week since we discussed the 36th pick. Is there anybody that has stood out to you going back and maybe looking at the options there in the second round that you think the Kings should be looking at? And do you happen to have a favorite at this point for that pick?
I mean, a lot of my favorites for that pick are guys that are pretty clearly, they're almost certainly going to be picked in that 20 to 30 range. But, there's typically like 15 players that everyone thinks will be in the 20 to 30 range. So inevitably one or two of them will fall down to that top of the second round and the Kings can take advantage. I like a lot of the 3-and-D wings. You look at a player like Josh Okogie. You look at players like DeAnthony Melton at USC. I think his name's Kyrie Thomas. Yeah, Kyrie Thomas out of Creighton is pretty interesting to me. I just think wing depth should be a priority for the Kings. They have plenty of players on the wing, but you look at Buddy Hield, probably isn't a small forward ever. Bogdan Bogdanovic can play small forward a little bit, but it's not going to ever be his primary position, I don't think. And then Justin Jackson's pretty locked into small forward, so he doesn't have that flexibility to move to the 2 or the 4 really, unless he adds some strength. I would love to see more players like a Jaylen Brown, not necessarily that skilled. Obviously, you're going to have to find a player like that a little higher in the draft, but someone who can shift between 2 and 3, 3 and 4, or even ideally 2 through 4, and just give you nice depth on the bench. I think the Kings have too many players that are locked into a position. So the one player that I've really seen that I'm not necessarily that interested in, I would say, is Jalen Brunson. Not that I don't think he's worth being considered in that range, just that with Fox and the fact that I think Bogdanovic is going to play a little point guard and that Frank Mason's going to need minutes, I just think you're going to have to make a trade to accommodate a player like Jalen Brunson. And if we know anything, it's that, we've seen plenty of log jams come up under Vlade Divac, and he hasn't done anything to alleviate that. So I don't know that I want another backup point guard.
Let me throw out a trade here. I heard it last night on Simmons' podcast, so I'm repping it from him. Kings trade De'Aaron Fox to the Orlando Magic for, what do they have, the 5th pick, 6th pick, something like that? Yay or nay? Zach Feldman.
I would say no.
If you're the Kings or the Magic?
But I would say no.
If you're the Kings or the Magic, who's saying no?
Honestly, probably both. If I'm the Kings, I think Simmons was talking about doing it for Trae Young, I would probably say no.
If the Kings did that to draft Trae Young, I think I'd just be done. I'd put down the podcast microphone, walk out, wipe my hands of the situation. No one would ever hear from me again. John, how about you? Who says no?
Yeah, if the Kings did that for Trae Young, we all know who made that pick. But I think strictly from a non-basketball standpoint, the Kings have really latched themselves to De'Aaron Fox, saying he's going to be a superstar, he's going to be this, he's going to be that. And I guess we saw this with the DeMarcus Cousins trade where they kept saying they committed to him and then he was just gone one day. So you never know what they would do to a player that they commit to like this, but I just think it would be a tough PR sell to move Fox 1 year in after he was sort of theoretically the savior after moving DeMarcus Cousins. So I think for that reason, the Kings really don't say yes to any Fox trade unless it's just wild, like Fox for 1 and even something else for Phoenix, even though, Fox for 1 would be wild in the first place. I just think the Kings know from a PR standpoint, they're going to need to get, insane value for him. But on a basketball sense, I don't know that a lot of that was kind of talked about because I listened to that podcast. It was sort of from the baseline of if the Kings pick Doncic, which they should, how does Fox fit into that? And I think Fox is less of a point guard and more of a little bit of a playmaker and someone who scores well in isolation. And that's assuming he develops his shot more. But with how fast he is and how well he handles the ball, he can be a really good isolation scorer. I don't know if he has a great feel for running the offense. Like, he's probably average for point guards in that sense at his peak. And so I think he's a perfect fit next to Doncic, where you want someone to help him run the offense a little bit. And Doncic is also, again, a player that can play really well off the ball. I think we've covered that before on the podcast. So I just don't know that it makes sense to move Fox. I don't know what you want to do with that 6 pick. And picking Trae Young makes even less sense to me. I could see 6 if you really feel like you don't need a point guard and you want to go with a big or something. But I don't know. I don't think Fox is the person to trade to try and get another pick.
I got to say, I'm kind of intrigued by the possibility. You get Doncic. He's going to be a primary playmaker. He's 6'8". You got Bogdan as the other running mate in the backcourt. People think Bogdan is 6'6". In reality, he's probably closer to 6'4". If you keep Fox, you got kind of a small-ish backcourt for the future. I'm not opposed. If the Kings could make it happen, I'd be down for it. Because
Trae Young's even smaller than Fox.
No. I don't think you make that trade with the idea that you're going for Trae Young at, I think the Magic have the 5th pick? No, the 6th pick, which I think they've had the 6th pick for like 4 years in a row. You do that, and you're trying to get one of the forwards. I mean, at that point, like to give the roster some defensive toughness, and he's got some offensive feel too. He shot pretty well from 3. However, I don't know what his free throw percentage was. Zach may be able to enlighten us with that. Jaren Jackson Jr., fit that in with those guys. It's a kind of a long starting 5. Very skilled, and I think it gives the Kings a little bit more of a defensive identity, a lot more length, a lot more athleticism, more youth. I think the fit would be ideal. However, I just don't see the Magic giving up that 5th pick, despite the fact that they do, in fact, need a point guard. Let me, like we've been doing the whole podcast, let me get a question out to both of you. What do you think is going to be the surprise in the draft? What's your gut instinct as far as something that's going to surprise us? Zach, go. You guess first. I apologize. Yeah.
I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Zaire Smith are going to go a lot higher than people have been thinking so far. I think Gilgeous could definitely end up being the best point guard in this draft. And Zaire Smith, his athleticism is just off the charts. I mean, he's up there with Bagley. Obviously, he's not as tall. He's only about 6'4". But he absolutely flies and wasn't supposed to come out this year. But after workouts and combine, they gave him a high enough grade where he liked it. He's still raw, but that's someone where I could definitely see them creeping up to like 10. Gilgeous-Alexander around like that 10, 11 as well. And I think, I'm not sure if many people have them ranked that high, but I think definitely based on athleticism and then Gilgeous's length, they could definitely rise up.
John?
I mean, it almost feels at this point, if the Kings pick Doncic with how little, no one, I can't think of a single person. Maybe either of you two can correct me on this. Has anyone really come out and said the Kings like Doncic?
I don't think so.
How about this? Let's put it this way. The front office, like I have said many times on this podcast, the Serbian mafia has got to like the prospect from Serbia with Serbian roots. It's a near certainty.
I think it's all been smoke screens. I think they like him and they're trying to get someone to trade up, and then they can trade back and still get him.
That seems too
I
risky.
just don't. I don't think the Kings are able to pull that off.
Exactly. I don't see the front office having the kind of bandwidth necessary to make that happen.
Yeah, my fear is that they have a feeling they can do that, but
however, wait, I want to stop you right there. However, it is nice to see your front office trying to pull off something complex, even if they don't have the bandwidth to do it. Go on, John.
Well, at this point, with all the stuff that's come out today for Michael Porter, and it's, I guess, for noting, it's June 14th, so all of the can't get out of bed stuff came out today, and I think that has to be a shock if you take a player like that at 2. I think Bagley's a little bit of a shock because I don't think most teams would take him at 2, and there's not a ton of indication necessarily that the Kings are in on Bagley. And I think Doncic is a little bit of a surprise at this point because there hasn't really been anything linked. There's really been no indication that Doncic is really that big of a consideration for the Kings. So I think whatever the Kings do is sort of a shock at this point. And that is probably the initial surprise of the draft. I think the other thing is where Porter goes.
It's really interesting that the Sacramento media has so centered on Michael Porter Jr. as being the pick that the Kings are going to make at number 2. One more thing on Doncic, though. I think another part of this, why he's not being associated with the Kings as much, is because he hasn't been able to come in for a workout. And anytime there's a high-profile workout, and an analyst comes out saying, oh man, this guy had a blow-away workout, like automatically everybody jumps on the bandwagon and say, man, he could really go there. That could really happen. They really like him. And because Luka's in Europe, still playing basketball, he hasn't had any of that happen with an NBA team so far. That's something to consider here. Like I said before, Serbian front office likes the Serbian sensation. That's just fact of life there. Anything else we need to cover Kings draft-wise, John, that you could think of?
One thing we didn't talk about is the fact that Wendell Carter got brought in for a workout, or did not get brought in, will be brought in the future for a workout.
Well, I just saw that. The Kings saw his workout in LA with a bunch of other people, and they're bringing him in for a meet and greet this weekend. I'm not high on Wendell Carter. If he ends up being the pick, I'll be concerned. I'll be very concerned for lots of reasons.
Well, my 2 thoughts on Wendell is he has such a well-rounded game. He can shoot pretty well. I would put him above Bagley as a shooter at this point easily. Very smart offensively, can pass a little bit, blocks shots well, rebounds well, has a lot of size. There's a lot to like with Wendell Carter, and I think he might even be brought in. This is completely, speculation, but if the Kings feel like, all right, we're going to trade back to 4 or 5 for, let's say, Porter, if Porter gets picked right in front of you and Doncic is gone too, you want that backup. And let's even say that Orlando's the team that you're trading back to. I think it's smart to take a look at some of those players in that 4 to 10 range, knowing that if you want to trade back, anything can happen at that point, and you better be ready to pick someone else. So he may be brought in as a favorite in that range, assuming the player that you want to fall doesn't. Who knows?
Can all of us agree that if the Kings take Wendell Carter Jr. at number 2, it'll be the craziest thing that's ever happened in the draft since Anthony Bennett at number 1 in 2013? Can we all agree on that?
Oh, for sure.
Honestly, I'd take Wendell over Michael Porter.
Okay, I'd be okay with that. But that's in a Go ahead, Zach.
I was agreeing. I like Wendell more.
In a vacuum, that's fine. However, this is the second pick in the draft, and it's going to determine the Kings' success of their franchise for the next decade. I want to be taking somebody that has a chance to take the team to contender status. I don't see him being that kind of player, John. I don't see it at all.
I mean, For me, here's how I view it. First, a lot of people have been talking about how Bagley is the safe pick at 2. He is absolutely not the safe pick at 2. And, I mean, Doncic is the real safe pick at 2. It almost feels like we're having a conversation that we just shouldn't even be having. Like, the fact that Doncic wasn't the pick a month ago is just nuts to me. I get doing due diligence, but all of this, I don't know. Hopefully it's rumors. But assuming it's not, in my mind, Porter's not safe. Jaren Jackson's actually extremely safe. I think maybe Jaren Jackson's a little bit, probably for me, is ahead of Wendell Carter by quite a bit. But Wendell Carter, offensively, he's probably a better passer than Jaren Jackson at this point, is a little more polished on that end. So, you know that if you take Wendell Carter or Jaren Jackson, and these are really the only two guys that I feel this way about that are outside of the clear top 2 of Ayton and Doncic, that they're going to help you. And if you feel like Fox is a star and, Hield or Bogdanovich or whoever else, Harry Giles is a star, and the Kings truly feel that way, and they think we just need to get high-level supporting cast, players around that, Wendell Carter is a great pick for that. And I think you're probably looking at trading back to try and take someone like that, but he's a guy that really, really knows what he's doing when he's playing and, plays the right way, plays hard, has a lot of size. It seems like a very easy pick if you're looking for someone that's just going to fill in around what you feel like you already have versus if you feel like you need a star to truly be competitive. I don't know if he's the guy, but if they feel like they have those stars, it's not a bad decision at all to trade back to like 5 or 6 and pick up Wendell.
Zach, is there anything you can see or that you would like in terms of a trade between the Kings and the Bulls at the top?
I don't think so. I mean, we also have 22. I think it's 22. So theoretically, there could be something there since we have the extra pick. I'd rather keep 7 and 22. Mostly because I'm not sure if that's enough to go up to 2 anyways. And trading up typically is the wrong move. It is at least analytically the wrong move. So I'm content with kind of just getting whoever falls to 7 and then getting another potential impact player at 22. There's been reports about Dunn not working too hard in the offseason so far. I don't think the Kings would have much interest in him. I don't know why they would, so I don't know if there really is any fit there.
Who do you like for the Bulls at number 7?
If Jackson, Bamba, or Carter somehow fall, I don't think Jackson would fall. But Bamba or Carter, I would be happy with for sure. I think both would pair very well with Lowry, Markkanen. And then also, Miles Bridges is one of my favorite players in the draft. It seems like he's falling more towards double digits or teens right now, which I don't really know why. He has an NBA-ready body. He can shoot, make plays. He needs to work on his dribbling still a little bit, but he's a guy that's fallen because he stayed another year, and I don't know if we're correct in that analysis of putting him down a little further just because he stayed for a sophomore year. Because he seems like the real deal, and if he makes the most all-star teams of anyone in this draft, I wouldn't be too surprised.
He's my favorite.
So I think,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just saying, I think that at 7 would work well with the roster and as well one of the best players available.
I like the guy. I like Miles Bridges out of Michigan State. He's my pick for the Cavs. I so badly want the Cavs to pick him because I think if they do, then it makes for a much more compelling case for LeBron to go back to Cleveland. Quickly, though, Bamba next to Markkanen. We just watched playoffs where everything was switching. Big men were being run off the floor like crazy. You get the Bulls taking another big man, another 7-footer to pair with the 7-footer they picked the prior year. That doesn't concern you at all?
Well, one, I'm not too concerned about the Bulls making it to any conference finals for any time in the near future. So I'm not really calculating that in right now. I don't really trust Garpax to push us forward past the first round. But, I mean, you do need someone next to Markkanen, and just because Bamba happens to be 7 feet doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, his shot it was decent at Texas. The reports are that he switched his motion already, and it's looking a lot better. So we'll have to see how it works. Maybe not right away, but he's a guy that can stretch the floor offensively. On defense, no matter what, Lowry's going to be out there unless if he's getting run off the floor, then we're probably not in the playoffs anyways. So I think between Carter or Bamba, I think Carter would be a better fit next to Lowry just because he is a little more switchy with the 4s and the 5s. If he gets switched onto a 3 or a 2, he wouldn't be terrible. But Bamba does have the length to help make up for it at almost 7'1" with the 7'10" wingspan. So I think just being able to contest shots, or if he gets beat, he still can make up for it with a block or a contest from far away.
There's been a lot of Bamba hype in the last week. People are really high on Bamba for some reason. Is there a universe where the Kings take Bamba at number 2, John?
I mean, they haven't brought him in yet. There's certainly time to bring him in. You look at the Wendell Carter workout, not something we knew about until today. So there's time to still bring him in. They really need to do that before they take him at 2. But I don't think it's wild. He's got a 7'10" wingspan, which is just unprecedented. And sometimes with these physical, whether it be your height, length, athleticism, whatever it is, it really comes down to what you think you can help them do with that, right? Because if you feel like you can help Bamba really maximize that, no one else has that tool in the league. And so it makes him really unique, and that's kind of the type of player you're looking for at the top of the draft, is someone who's unique. But one of my big questions, if you don't mind me asking one.
I completely do not mind.
Perfect. All right. So, Zach, you clearly like Luka Doncic, and you feel he's the best player in the draft. And I'm sure there's some price where you'd be willing to move from 7 to 2 to take Doncic. So what's the absolute best thing if you get to run the Bulls that day? What's the absolute best thing you'll offer the Kings for 2?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It would probably be 7 and 22. I don't think cuts it, just given the price that the Sixers set last year to move up from 3 to 1.
Sure.
Maybe 7 and done, 7-22 and done. That might be a little high. Like I said, I'm not a fan of trading up. Numbers, it doesn't work well. And I think the Bulls could use extra players. So even if it is for Doncic, I probably still wouldn't, just because we can get a guy with huge potential at 7, and then another, 22 still has a lot of, if a couple people fall, or if not, it's a 3-and-D wing or a crazy athlete. So I think probably 7 and 22 if I did have to make an offer. I just don't think the Kings would take that.
I don't see an offer either. I only see poo-poo platters that I don't like. John?
I mean, I think the Kings are almost in the opposite position of, everything's really a balance, right? Trading back was, I don't know, maybe not the best decision trading up was not the best decision for the 76ers last year, but you can't do one or the other too often, right? So if you trade up every year, all of a sudden you're out of assets. And we're almost at the opposite, where Vlade has traded back so many times. If you're going to trade back again, you better get an unbelievable amount, because if you're looking for extra depth, they have too many young players at this point. They constantly talk about how we're trying to add young players, but on the flip side of that, they're also pretty regularly talking about we don't have enough minutes to give to Justin Jackson, Scala Vicier, whoever it is. Like, we just don't have that we don't have those minutes. We have so many young players we have to develop already. So if you really feel that way, to me, I don't understand trading back from 2. It just doesn't really add up to me. The only reason I'm even really thinking it's a good idea is because the Kings are talking about players like Porter, who, to be honest, the only reason I'm hoping they trade back is they trade back a little too far and miss out on Porter and go with anyone else. But I don't know. I don't know that the Kings can trade back much more. So 7-22 isn't something I'd take, but I also see where the Bulls, they're not really a team who has done that type of trading back like the Kings have done. And so I think 7-22, maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. They're also pretty early on in that rebuild, so I know it seems like Lauri Markkanen is a pretty solid piece, and beyond that, it's a lot like the Kings, where there's a lot of interesting question marks with Valentine, Chris Dunn,
so on and so forth. Yeah.
Cristiano Felicio. Yeah. Did you know that Felicio's from Roseville, by the way?
For
all those Kings fans out there?
I did not know that.
Yeah, he went to some. Yeah, he went some like shady academy in Roseville, and it's quite a story. I haven't looked at it for a while, but yeah, he's kind of a Sacramento native.
Nice. Well,
he's Brazilian originally, right?
Yeah, he just went to high school in Roseville. I did not know some weird basketball academy that was kind of a scam.
Zach, John, is there anything else that we need to jam into this episode before we call it a day? I'll go with you first, Zach.
You know, it is a Kings podcast. We talked about the biggest surprises. I didn't mention anything with the Kings just because I'm kind of anything they do is no longer a surprise to me. We're
not even going to react to that line because of how true it is.
Yeah.
Right. They already cut Papagiannis, the first round pick from 2 years ago. So.
Don't forget Richardson.
I kind of liked Richardson, to be honest, but he was a little later.
Yeah, I liked him. We traded him for almost nothing.
Hey, Bruno Caboclo is definitely something.
He's something, but
next year's his year.
Yeah, we got to re-sign him if we're going to do that.
Right, at the draft, I think one of the analysts at the draft that year said he was 2 years away from being 2 years away. So I think next year is his year.
So you think he's Kevin Durant next year? We're just a little bit out from that.
Right, and then you draft Michael Porter, and you have 2 Kevin Durants. Move to Seattle, and then you sign an actual Kevin Durant, and you're in business.
Perfect.
Yeah, and then we're out of a team, and we all go cry ourselves to sleep. I don't know about that.
But 3 Durants.
I think that's what I'm going to name this episode, 3 Durants. John, anything from you?
No, that's pretty much it.
That's it? Awesome. Thank you, Zach. Thank you for the hopping on the show with us today.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for having me.
And John, thank you for making time, as always.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well.
Oh, well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you guys on the show. As always, you can find all of Hoopball's Sacramento Kings coverage on Twitter at HoopballKings. He is Jon Schifferle on Twitter. Find him at Jon Schifferle. Zach, what's your Twitter handle?
I am ZF_analytics.
Nice. Go follow him on Twitter. I am at my buddy Chris. And what's the last part that I mentioned? I keep forgetting. Every single time I forget. Yeah, for Zach, for John, and for myself, this has been fun. You can also find all of your NBA news, NBA fantasy news, and Sacramento Kings coverage period at hoop-ball.com. That's going to do it for us today. Until next time, see you later.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.